welcome. My name is Fran Purcell. I am Senior Lecturer on Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And again, welcome to today's Education Now episode entitled Planning for College After Affirmative Action. Education Now is a webinar series providing actionable insights and strategies to shape new approaches to challenges in education. And you'll see in the Q&A section and the button at the bottom of your screen, if you'd like to ask some questions as you're listening to our panelists, please go ahead and do so. And near the end of the webinar, we'll try to cover as many as possible. You will also find at the bottom of your screen closed caption access there as well. So listen, we have a lot to talk about. So I want to welcome our three guests today. Anthony Abraham Jack is the faculty director of the Newberry Center at Boston University and associate professor at Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. Mandy Savitz-Romer is the Nancy Fortzenheimer Aronson Senior Lecturer in Human Development and Education, and also the faculty lead of the Ed School's counseling strand of the Human Development and Education program. And also Eric Waldo, President and CEO of the District of Columbia College Access Program and a proud HGSC alum. So welcome to you all. Glad to have you here today. So listen, Eric, I'm gonna start with you, and if you wouldn't mind, just to get us all on the same page, would you provide a brief summary of the ruling on affirmative action that came out from the Supreme Court earlier this summer? Just again, so we can all get grounded in that.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So yeah, on June 29th, the Supreme Court held that Harvard College and the University of North Carolina violated the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act by what they said is impermissibly using race in their undergraduate admissions practices. So specifically, they said that the UNC's consideration of individual student race violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which applies to public colleges and universities. The court reaffirmed that Title VI requires all colleges and universities that receive federal financial assistance, public and private, that they have to comply with the same requirements imposed by the Equal Protection Clause. And the court also held that Harvard College's consideration of individuals' student race violated those requirements as well. I think what's important to just flag about this decision from June is that while the Supreme Court said that that these programs were inappropriately and unlawfully considering individual student race, it's not that we can't consider race at all anymore. The court said they limited the ability of institutes of higher ed to consider an applicant's race in and of itself as a factor in deciding whether to admit the applicant, but they can still remain free to consider a quality or characteristic of a student, such as other underlying things like courage, motivation, self-determination that could be tied to a student's race. So it's not that you can't consider race overall, but that just the way these programs were designed, you can no longer consider race in that manner. So institutions still have some freedom, but we definitely took a big step backwards in terms of equity and acknowledging race in higher ed.
Great, thanks, Eric. Thanks so much. That's a great summary. Appreciate that. And Eric, well, I'm just going to stick with you for another moment, and then Mandy and Tony ask each of you the same thing. What's your hot take on this? Where are you most concerned around this new ruling, particularly for students in our high schools across the country?
So just to start, right, we're in this phase again where we are seeing op-eds about is college worth it, right? The pendulum keeps swinging every 5 to 7 years where we debate the value of higher ed. And as a higher ed success advocate, I have to say it's always wrong to tell students college isn't worth it, especially for our Black, brown, and low-income students. They're going to make more money. They're going to be part of the knowledge economy if they go to college. This decision, just by virtue of what it signals to the country, is putting another block in front of young Black and brown students, telling them that higher ed might not be for them, that these exclusive places are saying a keep out sign and not a welcome them inside. And we need to be doing more to eliminate barriers when today only 9% of bottom income quartile students are finishing college within 6 years. We need to be making it easier for those students to get to a higher education degree, not harder. And that's deeply upsetting to me.
Thanks, Eric. Mandy, how about you? What's uppermost in your mind about this decision?
Well, I mean, everything Eric just said for sure. I mean, I think we really we've spent so much time trying to help minoritized youth understand that college is for them, that they stand to benefit greatly. And so I think that anything that sends up confusion is a challenge. I think second to that is that I really worry that this is a higher education issue that is going to fall to the backs of educators in K-12, that this is going to become an additional burden. The admissions process has always been a little bit of a black box and a little bit of an unknown process that sits between K-12 and higher ed. And for a long time, I think we've felt like the two entities don't really talk well to each other and haven't made really clear what one is expecting from the other. So now I feel like we've complicated that even more. And so while I feel like the conversations have largely situated in higher ed, I'm really grateful to today's conversation because I feel that those in K-12 recognize that this has a potential to be really challenging for young people. And yet the burden of it is going to fall to the backs of educators. So I think that's probably a main concern. I also just want to take a moment to say just what a disappointment this is and just how incredibly frustrated I am by this ruling. Although, as Eric said, it's not as clear cut as I think some would like to make it out to be. It is still incredibly disappointing that we're having this conversation when we had yet to make the strides in equal opportunity that we know young people deserve.
I agree 100%. I already struggled talking about affirmative action, especially when they always want to equate any success that a Black person does, that a woman does, to like, oh, you were an affirmative action baby, or you were less qualified, but you were giving a chance. And I just feel that now that individual story is like blanketed across the country and is going to have a chilling effect. And that's one thing I'm absolutely frustrated with as well. But Francis, your question about hot topics, and to build on what Mandy just said, who are going to be the early adapters to navigate this new murky water? And what responsibility are we placing on already tapped schools to now look at legislation as they try to figure out how to suggest what schools students should apply to, how they should think about applying, right? And we're not there to help them, right? The higher education has kept this kind of like this blood-brain barrier with the K-12 system, except when we're like transferring students, that we lose something, right? The early adapters who are going to be doing are probably going to be the prep schools, are going to be the boarding schools, are going to be the schools that have a team of guidance counselors and college counselors who meet every year and bring people in to coach students through the process by literally writing the applications for them. They're going to know how to navigate the new Supreme Court landscape. And the other part about that gets me the most about this is students now are going to have to pimp out their poverty or tell stereotypical stories of their racial identity to be able to flag to a school, hey, I'm Black, hey, I'm Latino, hey, I'm Native, in a way that's going to be so inorganic and artificial, but yet you're still going to have to do it, because if you don't, how are they going to read something into your application against other people? So we're putting not only additional responsibility on an overtaxed K-12 system, now we're also asking students to take on some emotional burden of having to play race as if it's not their life, but a character or a scene from a production, just to get into school even more than they already were doing.
Thanks, Tony. And so, Mandy, thinking about what Tony just said about, sort of well-resourced high schools, they're probably navigating this, who knows, pretty well, maybe. But for those high schools that are not as well-resourced, the vast majority, what advice do you have for school counselors who are working with these students, and how might they come to understand what needs to happen given this new world that we're in?
Well, I have lots of thoughts about what school counselors and college advisors might consider, but before I even go there, I think this is a systemic issue, and Tony's right to say, like, this is going to further exacerbate the inequalities in college counseling supports. We know that there are many young people, more Black and brown students, who attend schools with no counselors. The counselors in those schools often don't have time for professional development and learning. They have higher caseloads. They spend more time doing non-counseling tasks. So there are systemic issues. So what I say first to those in K-12, superintendents, district, school leaders, your counselors are needed more than ever. And they need to be able to intercept those signals that we started talking about, whereby students might now inadvertently interpret this ruling as meaning they can't go. You know, students are very much oriented towards phones and sound bites and headlines, and they're going to see headlines and make meaning out about what this means for them. And so we need counselors and teachers to interrupt that, make sure they understand that college is still for them. Second, they're getting the message that race can no longer be considered. And then they're opening the Common App and being asked to indicate their race. The potential takeaway is for them to think that's going to hurt. That is going to hurt their chances of admission or how the people are making sense of their experiences. So I think we need to take a big step back and say, more than ever, counselors, particularly those who work with minoritized youth, need access to all of their stakeholders. And that's not just students, that's families. Families are also questioning what this means for their children. So I think counselors are the experts in their schools on this topic. They educate teachers, they educate families, they educate everybody in student systems. So I think we need to make sure that they are up to date, that they understand what this means so that they can communicate early and often to everybody around them. I think then counselors also need to step back and see, like, what does this mean for the essay? As Tony points out, if this further reinforces the need for students who've experienced trauma to sort of exploit that or their family's trauma in any way, there's another narrative. There's a way in which students can talk about their racialized experiences in strength-based ways, in ways that celebrate joy and all the wonderful things that have helped them understand what's possible. We just haven't gone that route. We've gone the negative kind of trope around trauma. I think counselors, I've been doing some research on counselors' letters of recommendation, and they don't know what to put in their letters. They don't even know if anyone's reading their letters. And I think they are worried for their students. And what I hope doesn't happen is that they think it's on them just to drop a student's race in, because that's not what admissions officers want. Admissions officers want broader context of students' lived experience. And I think they're going to need some help learning how to do that. And to Tony's point, if that learning is exclusive to private schools, private college counselors, and only the sort of select few who can hire and support and fund that kind of curated support, then we're going to widen the gap even more. And, we already see trends of that through the chilling effect, but access to planning support is critical, and it's already not even. So this is going to be something we need to really take up.
Thanks, Mandy. Eric, I'm going to invite you, given your leadership at District of Columbia College Access Program, which helps students enroll in college, right, and complete college, but, thinking about all these things that Mandy just raised, and Tony, like, can you sort of build on that, like specific advice for educators, counselors, families, like around how can we best marshal our resources to get more students on the college track?
Just to build on some of the things Mandy's been saying, there was an unequal playing field before, and in some ways we need to make sure that we're leveling it by sharing some of the better practices that we should have been doing anyway. But some very simple ideas that I would share, and just to double on some of that have been said before, is on the college application process with respect to essays, right? We do want to create a strengths-based manner to share your race experience so that it's not a mystery, but it can be done in a strengths format. I do think early application, again, is something that we need to talk more about. I think about Michael Dannenberg's research on the early application gap and how it prioritizes by a huge percentage, I think it's over 5%, white students, upper middle class students, but getting students who are applying to selective schools to apply early. I think things that we know work also are applying to multiple schools, right? So at least 4 to 5 colleges is one of our strategies. And then I do think these pathway programs are allowed under the Supreme Court guidance. If you check out what the Office for Civil Rights has put out at the U.S. Department of Education, we can still have these pathway programs. If you are in a city, you're a Pell program, you're an Upward Bound program, you're of course serving primarily students of color, low-income students, you can still double down on those pathways and partnerships with colleges. At DC College Access Program, DC CAP, we partner with 14 colleges and universities to send cohorts of 20 students, and they're excited because of the strengths and the diversity that our students bring. I was just visiting University of Massachusetts Lowell last week, and you may not guess it, but our students in DC, their persistence rates at UMass Lowell are in the 90s, way eclipsing the achievement gap, and that's because they've created an amazing cohort support dynamic where they're feeling seen and heard and can achieve more than they would have in their own backyard. And that's awesome. So we can make it about achievement, strength, and diversity in the best ways possible that very much square within what the Supreme Court wants. Last thing I just want to say, which is important in this conversation, is we all get tied up in knots about elite universities. This is a Harvard Graduate School of Education webinar, but the reality is we should be doing more also to encourage our students to go to really great HBCUs and historically minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving institutions. These institutions that were created primarily to serve and help those students feel seen, heard, and create a supportive community. That's the secret sauce in college completion. A lot of those places are non-selective, open enrollment. We don't have to make this all about whether or not, Princeton's going to let in 15 more Pell kids in their class. Mm-hmm. There's so many places, SUNY, CUNY, you name it, that are killing it on helping our students already. Let's send our students to those schools.
Great, thanks, Eric. So
Frank, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony, please do.
The sociologist in me is 100% in agreement, except when it comes to, and I want to make sure that we still push students to have those true tier of schools, right? Apply as broadly as possible because it's incredibly important, because there's a reason why going to an elite school matters, like the higher the graduation rates and stuff like that. But one thing I will say, and it's going to piggyback on what Mandy said, it's not just students who are listening to sound bites, their families are too. We finally got to a point where we can say, hey, no loan financial aid policy. That means you go to school for free. We got that into the lexicon. We can talk about it in a way that families can understand. No loan equals good times, right? No loan equals you can go. There's so much rhetoric around the changing what can count and what can't. Some states are saying that, we have to get rid of all of our scholarship programs. We must engage our families in a much more direct way now and explain to them what is possible. We need to close the information gap for our families so they can understand this is why a student is asking for this information, which is an old prospect. Oh, why do you need my tax returns? But now we have this added weight that we have to now carry of saying, well, I live in Florida. Can I talk about this? I live in Oklahoma. Can I apply for this native scholarship? Like, is this legal, right? You have a whole host of other questions. We must bring families in earlier and may say it more often into the conversation, but speak to them in a way that is as accessible as possible. Because if not, then whatever they hear on the nightly news, the nightly hourly news at that, is going to dominate where their children apply to school.
Great, thanks, Tony, for really homing in on the families that really need to be part of this process. So I heard each of you say in one way or another, talking about sort of the gap between K-12 and higher ed and how this decision will, while it's impacting across the board, but disproportionately, on K-12, what are some ideas you might have that higher ed can work more closely with and be more supportive of our high schools and, all of the various stakeholders that are involved at that level?
Let me go quickly. I'd say like what Mandy already just talked about. Let's not pretend let's be honest about where we're sending our admissions deans, right? Like when they're on their tours, are they going to the cities and communities where they actually know they could get, a better pipeline of diverse students, right? If you're coming to DCPS, DC public schools, like you better believe you're going to meet really extraordinary, diverse Black, brown, and low-income kids who have extraordinary stories to tell. But is that on your tour with Exeter, Choate, and, pick your other elite private school? I don't know. So let's make sure we're going to the places where we can find those kids. Don't tell me you can't find them. I think number two is honestly, even before the Supreme Court decision, deans of admission could have been doing a lot better and a lot more for our students and communities of color. Tomorrow, Harvard could admit an entire class of Pell-only eligible students who, again, we're not considering race. We'll just do 100% Pell, and they're all going to meet those academic requirements. But that would upend the universe. Why? Let's interrogate. What does that mean about, are we hoarding power and how are we sharing it? And I would encourage deans of admission to say, what's your commitment to diversity in the wake of this decision, and truly challenge yourself to say what you could make possible.
Thanks, Eric. Mandy, you wanted to weigh in on that?
Well, I was going to talk about recruiting as well, because we know recruiting practices were not equitable before. Rural schools, many schools don't have the same kind of visitation. I think institutions need to be much more creative about that, whether it's actually locating their admissions counselors in cities and in places so they can actually build relationships with counselors and with schools. I often, imagine these the phone lines between some private college counselors and admissions officers with this strong social capital that just a lot of counselors, there's a lot of turnover that they don't have. And that is a disservice to their students. So I think when admissions officers are visiting K-12 schools this fall, next fall, whenever, they need to ask the counselors, do your students understand the ruling, and not make any presumptions about what they know or what they don't know. I think they need to be prepared to find out and not sort of assume they understand what's happening in K-12. I think we've articulated that we don't really know what happens in the admissions process, but also we don't know what schools are doing. Some K-12 schools have invested heavily in college and counseling support, transition counselors, college success counselors. And so I think that we have to kind of go into this with how can we be helpful? I think as somebody in the group today asked, profiles, what do you want in the profiles? What needs to be in there to put students in context? Don't make us guess. This is a very small piece. One of our doctoral students, Tara Nicola, had done research on this, and nobody knows what needs to go on a profile, whereas some schools have these highly curated profiles and other schools are just putting demographics and other information that quite honestly an admissions officer could get somewhere else. I think that's another thing we have to make sure that we're calling on higher ed to do. And just one more point before I totally pass on, because I want to hear what Tony has to say. I think that the underlying issue around this, Eric's bringing up issues of power, are really conversations about race. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that all of the educators in students' lives need to be able to talk about race, and they need to broach conversations about race with their students, about their racialized experiences. And actually, the school counseling profession is overwhelmingly white women. We don't have a lot of racial diversity, or to be honest, much gender diversity. That means that white counselors need to quickly get educated and informed about how to broach those conversations. Because if they can't talk about it with students, students won't be well positioned to talk about it in their essays and with admissions officers and other people who do interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. One thing I want more people in higher education to do is actually, and especially in helping overtaxed high schools work through this, is greater partnerships with college access programs, and not just college access programs that place students at elite prep schools, right? We know that colleges have relationships with Prep for Prep, right? And Prep for Prep sends 50% of their students a year almost to Ivies, let alone to top 20 colleges. We know that pipeline is there, but there are so many other college access programs, or even college access adjacent programs. We need to understand what are the things that students do outside, what organizations are students involved in that have a positive impact on their life and their possibility of mobility. If we had greater communication, right? We always say, okay, when we go to a college visit, we invite just the college counselors and the school, but there's a whole host of organizations around students that sound like, they're if they're the center of their own universe. It's a whole satellite, a whole universe around them that is helping them get to college, right? Why not invite some of those organizations in and be able to have the information go beyond just who can make it that night into the gym, or things like that. And to Mandy's point, right, I think higher ed needs to be clear in their statements about what their priorities are, right? I'm still waiting for more schools, and I want to applaud Amherst, and I want to applaud Wesleyan about ending legacy admissions. I want them to be as clear in their decision making about ending legacy admissions, and I want more schools to do it, as to why they are defending or recruiting a diverse class. Get over this. It's a benefit for everybody. I'm tired of, it's a benefit for white students to have more diversity. That's basically what we boiled down affirmative action to, and we couldn't even hold on to that. So let's just completely get rid of that false notion anyway, and talk about what we really need to address the legacy of racism and exclusion in this country, to understand the lasting legacy of that inequality in where students live, where students go to school, the air they breathe, the parks that they can't play at, the swimming pool that they don't have access to, all of those things manifesting themselves in the college application process, because there's such a difference between because by race and understanding that legacy. So training not only the college counselors, but also the college admissions officers and what they are now looking at and looking for in a way they didn't have to before.
Can I double click on this? I think it's also really important, and this is a hard truth that I discovered in my journey in college and success, is that the admissions deans, like, when I was a kid applying to college, I thought it was really this like meritocracy, like, oh wow, like if I just get the right grades and do the right things, like it's like the Olympics. If I run the fastest race, I will just, I'll get the medal, I'll get in. And the reality is, especially at elite colleges, these are businesses that they're running. They're nonprofits, but they are bringing in students for various reasons. Why do we have legacy admissions? Why does someone get in because their dad's name is on a building? It is not this like pure, we want to think it's a pure white as snow motivation for colleges, but it's a complicated thing. And again, racism is built into that. And so I think that story is really important. I think it's also really important for us to recognize that we have a larger duty to help people on a track to higher ed, given all those historical burdens that we've had, and also the outsized role that education can have to disrupt the cycle of poverty. I think a lot about how do we make this process frictionless is the word I've been playing with a lot in my mind. In DC, we want to articulate a 2050 goal to have an 80% college completion rate, 6-year rate for our students. And one of our goals is we want it to be debt-free. We want the process to be frictionless, and we want it for those in need. And frictionless really matters because, to Anthony's point, like we put so many frictions in place for our low-income students. You got to prove how poor you are on the FAFSA, on the verification, on this form, on that form. Now we're going to make you secretly talk about your race in your essay. We just keep adding these frictions. And I think to get to solutions, these programs like UMass Lowell with DC CAP, we're reducing the friction. We're saying you can come here debt-free, no secret price, and we're going to give you cohort support. We can do more of those programs. I think direct admissions, I know SUNY is also moving forward with this. There's a way for us to make it easier for students to actually know I can go to college, it's paid for, and I'm not going to have to apply to 15 places. That's a way where we can really, I think, jettison people or give them a big leg up when they haven't had a leg up before for our most vulnerable students.
Eric, thanks. You sort of are leading into, I was gonna, I will ask you all, but I'll give you a second shot too, Eric, but I was gonna ask each of you, if there's one thing you really want to impress upon our audience, something that they should, have a major takeaway from today that you would want them to know about how to best improve navigating these experiences for our students, given the recent ruling. What is it that would be most important to you for them to know? So, Mandy, go ahead. You go first.
I mean, I so appreciate, Eric his work has been so great with students and building strong systems and calling on institutions. I want to build a better system in K-12. And I think that we need to make sure that the folks who have the most access to the most number of students have the best knowledge and training. And I just think we have to create tools and resources for counselors to use so that they're not left to their own device trying to figure out how to manage this. And I think we owe it to them, given the work they're doing and under the stressful conditions they're doing it under.
Thanks, Mandy. Tony?
I want to implore families to actually ask questions directly to the college and demand their answers. I want greater communication, want more established channels of information to be created, because it's not just about the child now. That family can also become an epicenter of information for an entire community. And it's better to get the information from the college or from a college than getting it, the nightly news where they're more interested in the soundbite than giving a fuller explanation of what's going on. So I would want colleges to begin to answer those questions, and not, whether that means having webinars in multiple languages, multiple times, whether it means engaging your current student body to involve themselves back into different communities, which means hiring students to be part of this outreach. I just feel that there needs to be greater lines of communication, especially now, with unfiltered, honest information.
Thanks, Tony. And Eric, you got something else you want to add, or you did a pretty good job right before, but I'll give you another shot.
I would just say one last thing, which is that
Yeah.
the reality is, and actually, Tony's written a lot about this. We have incredible grads and people who've gone through the process, and actually, they're usually the best advocates. So I think these near peer mentoring, like being really thoughtful about these alumni networks across the college access programs, who actually can be the ambassadors for colleges to create linkages between K-12, higher ed, and frankly, the business community as well, because that's the next step. I think in reality, we want to get not just that they're going to college, not just that they're graduating, but getting great jobs. And so that pure through line, if we can let alumni better connect to the school, better connect to the community, and help the institutions understand that their value is not just to be a country club, but to truly be an anchor institution, and they should be deeply engaged with the community. That's where it shouldn't be a secret of how you get into that university. It shouldn't be a secret of how, what the facilities are and who gets to use them. We need to be breaking down those doors, inviting people more, and being radically transparent about what it means to be fully engaged in your community. And I do think we all know too many people who got the bad advice from the counselor who told them you're not college material, right? Michelle Obama was told you're not Princeton material. Dr. Joe Biden was told you're not college material. My board chair, who is a billionaire, first in his family to go to college, was told to go to vocational school. So I'm hopeful that this negative note from the Supreme Court will motivate a lot of people to prove them wrong, because we know our students, all of them, deserve the opportunity to be their best selves through higher ed. And that is what got us all where we are. And I think we all have an obligation to try that much harder because of this decision, because our students they deserved a lot more before this decision. They deserve even more now.
Well, Tony, Mandy, and Eric, thank you each so much for being on this panel today. For those of you who joined this webinar, thank you for posing all of your questions. You can see we tried to work them in throughout. And I hope that everybody has gotten some good information and good insights and good actions you can come out of this from. And again, thank you for joining us, and have a good rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever in the world you're joining us from. So thank you so much.